Good evening, everybody. We are back with an extra special clinic this evening, celebrating Mental Health Awareness Week, which started on the 10th and will be running through to the end of this week. And I am so pleased to have such an incredible panel with me today. Some old faces, some new faces, and some very well-known faces as well. So I will give everybody a moment to introduce themselves in a second. But this, for me, is the most important mental health awareness week we've had in my career in this field. I've been working in mental health for 20 years now, and I cannot recall a time when people are struggling and as compromised as they are right now. There's a lot of people inadvertently believing that because things are going back to normal and on the 22nd of June we will have our freedoms back, that things are okay now. But actually, I found that's not the case. There are some people that are suffering more fear and anxiety now than when we were in full lockdown. The thought of going back when you've been told to be scared for so long has templated people. And actually now the thought of reintegrating into a more normal way of life is something that people are really struggling with. And that's really one of the things that we want to focus on today. I'm so honoured to have such a stellar lineup today, offering different views, different perspectives, and different thoughts around how we navigate our mental and emotional well-being, to build the resilience, to cope with whatever the future holds. So for those of you who don't know, if this is your first time tuning in, I'm Neil Shah. I'm the Chief De-Stressing Officer of the Stress Management Society. It's an international non-profit organization I set up 20 years ago. And my reason for being here is, I started to realize that what's happening is creating a secondary pandemic. If we didn't already have one long before COVID came along, and that's a mental health one. But it's an uncomfortable subject, and it's one that most people don't feel comfortable talking about because it has such a huge amount of stigma attached to it. But my concern is that we were not treating all health and public and social risks equally. It was all about COVID, but people were suffering for so many other reasons, and we just didn't talk about that, and we were not addressing it. That's why I joined Recovery, and that's one of the reasons I was very passionate about setting this clinic up. And I'm going to go around as I see you on the screen. So going around my lovely colleagues. Juliet, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Juliet. I'm a hypnotherapist in Farnham, Surrey. I said last week I found the recovery group when I was in need of support from peers because I was struggling to help people with their mental health in an environment where it was really challenging to deal with mental health. And now I'm really enjoying doing these mental health clinics, talking all things mental health at a time when it couldn't be needed more, I think.
Thank you, Julia. Emma, you don't need much of an introduction, but I'll let you do one anyway.
I do, Neil. I'm so Z-list. But I do like the fact that we look like we're in a play school setup, or like some kind of 1980s game show. It's brilliant, isn't it? Blank or something. Yeah, I'm Emma Kenny. So most people know me from either crime, not because I commit it, but because I present it, or daytime TV. I'm kind of murder or light entertainment on This Morning. But I'm obsessed with mental health. I've been practicing as a registered psychological therapist for over 20 years. And recovery has obviously been something I've been involved in since Neil began as well. Just this idea that COVID is something that's been important, but mental health has become a secondary factor. And without mental health and wellness, there is really no mental health or wellness per se. So physical and mental are so intertwined. The more that we can talk about it and be open about it, the better. There you go. That's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Emma. Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle Sharples. I'm a specialist community public health nurse in health visiting and school nursing. Yeah, and really I just found a lot of parents coming to me, especially friends, how we're going to support children, how we're going to protect them from this, from both ends of the spectrum, really. So yeah, just here to share my thoughts with you guys today.
Thank you. Anya.
Hi everyone, I'm Anya Predojevic. I'm a Chief Magic Officer for International Wellbeing Insights and the Stress Management Society. So I joined Neil very recently, and I worked on the campaign of Mental Health Awareness Week. And I'm also a yoga teacher, and I just graduated from my master's in occupational and business psychology. So well-being and mental health are great passions of mine, and I'm so happy to be today here and just to do the work we are doing in order to spread the awareness and support those in need.
Amazing. And last but by no means least. Felix.
Hello, everyone. I'm Felix. Nice to be back again. And I want to be a Chief Magic Officer as well. I think that's a great title. That's just brilliant. I need that. Sorry, I think my internet's playing up a little bit. I'm a psychologist, also in the media, just to be the token male foil to Emma. But really, I echo the same sentiments as my colleagues here. There's a lot of concerns about me, longer than my arm, about mental health, what's going on that's just being overlooked, as if it's irrelevant, as if it's collateral that doesn't really matter. Really concerns me, and where we're going, and the bigger picture and things like that. So yeah, that's why I'm here in a nutshell.
Amazing. Thank you, Felix. So let's open this up. Anya, I know that you've been working hard on the campaigns around this. Could you just share with everyone, what is Mental Health Awareness Week? What's its purpose? What's the theme for this year? So tell us a little bit more about what's going on and why we're here.
Neil. So it started back in 2001 in UK, and it's hosted by Mental Health Foundation. And the theme for this year is nature. Because obviously, through the lockdowns that we've been through, the top coping mechanism was going out and spending time in nature, taking walks, because we couldn't really see our friends, our family. We've been deprived of that. So people turned out to nature, and that's why the foundation decided to have that as a theme for this year. And, you know, I think, Juliet, last Thursday, we kind of brought a very good point out that, you know, we are nature. So like connecting to the nature is really not that relevant, because we are nature. We need to reconnect. If we got disconnected, we really need to reconnect back to the nature. And, you know, the purpose of Mental Health Awareness Week is exactly that, to spread the awareness, to talk about it, to have conversations, open conversations about mental health, and really encourage people to talk as well, but also take action, to do something about it, to seek help, and, you know, to reflect and notice how they feel and start talking openly about it. Yeah.
And thank you. And I think for me, this is a key point. We've talked about this before. We are so over self-care. We're so over walking in the parks and hugging trees to feel better. We have been taken so far away from our core nature and living in the way that we were designed to. We've had our human rights stripped away, our civil liberties, our freedoms. Hugging a tree and going to nature is not fit for purpose anymore. So really what I want to focus on is, how do we connect to our core nature and live in the ways that we were intended to as free sovereign beings? So I just want to put this out to you guys. You know, what are your observations in your different interactions with society, with the different work that you do, about how far we've come away from what we need to flourish and have happiness, well-being and wellness?
I mean, I'll start if you want me to, and then other people can join in. Look how well behaved we are, isn't it? Like, this is why we need one of those paddles from the shows and be like, is it okay? I think that for a very long time we've been living a broken blueprint. I think that most of us know that we've got a broken blueprint, and that is that our well-being has been going down, our mental health issues have been going up for a very long time, and you can almost look directly and strategically at when that began. And it really begins where convenience becomes an inconvenience. So the more that we've become convenienced by having our washing machines inside, by having our community centres closed because we can get our TVs on all the time, when we have youth centres closed because kids can be in headsets, the minute that we started to kind of pretty much from the 50s onwards disconnect from our local experience with our tribe, we can almost track how mental health has been impacted on. Then you can add to that all of the convenience foods that has had a massive impact on our internal experience, body-wise. And then you just explore how the individual nature of becoming more and more autonomous in our experience, I don't mean in an experience of feeling choice-based, but more in our individual experience in our homes, that you can literally see the decline. And that's before you go into the extra marginalised issues regarding racism, poverty, and all the things that, again, cause diversion and discussion that becomes alienated from one another as opposed to connected with one another. So I think that the fact that we've got so much urbanisation, and even though we only inhabit 18% of the UK, the world around us has felt like it's become more of an abstract experience because work-life balance is also so poor. So we have the absolute recipe for what makes good health and nature per se, which is spending lots of time with our peers who we really care for, having an extended family network, which is our community, making sure we protect and look after youth, and really foster an understanding that the whole village is responsible for children in dysfunction, not just parents, where schools stop teaching failure and success and start teaching a broader understanding of what makes healthy humans, and where we concentrate our efforts on spiritual connection, whether that's with the animals outside, nature outside, with the higher power and divinity, with spirituality in general. Those are the things that we know will make the blueprint correct. But unfortunately, at this moment in time, it's a little bit like everybody's too afraid to just go, hey, this really is screwed up. It really isn't working. All we're seeing is unhappiness and more separation and more of a poverty gap. And yet, for some reason, we still can't keep living it. So I guess my thing is like how we as individuals now go, yeah, this is wrong. It feels like an overwhelming thing to say that we can take the power back and that we can start actually saying this is wrong and it's not working. But if every single one of us just reaches a little bit of that courage and starts to do that, then we can reclaim something that has exponentially gone wrong in the past 50 to 60 years at least. And we can do things quite transformative within our communities, our schools, our society in general, but most of all in ourselves, so that we have a chance to use our core nature in a way that can literally transform our world. And that's not just this world in our UK, it's the world. It's the fact that what happens here impacts directly on, for example, sub-Saharan Africa. So I think that we have to recognize that we have so much more power than we believe, but we've spent a lot of time having that stripped away.
There's some really good points there. And I think, you know, I'm pretty sure it was Gandhi that said that you judge a society by how it treats its most vulnerable members. And for far too long, we have been failing the most vulnerable members of our society. We have made mental health an individual problem where it was always a social issue. And we individualize it like, you know, X or Ben or Frank or Hillary is broken. No, they're not. Society has failed them. And I think, you know, again, Michelle, with the work that you do, you know, working within the community, what are your observations on this and the failings that we've had as a society, particularly with regards to the most vulnerable members, youth, so people that have come from disadvantaged backgrounds or diverse people or whatever?
So I'm not currently in an active health visiting school nursing role. A lot of what I do now is more parenting consulting. However, I mean, some of the primary concerns go back to what Emma was saying, really, is just fundamental, I guess the primal things, really. And if you look at babies, for example, Eastern European orphans in Romania and places like that, even when they've got all the basic needs met in the orphan crisis some years ago, they were still dying because they were deprived of human touch and love and affection. And these things are actually more than just you know, nice to have. They're essential. They're part of our core needs. And I do worry about the impact on children. I know we've got a wave of speech and language issues brewing because children need to see mouths to communicate. That's how they learn. And, you know, it's not just about lip reading for people with, you know, hearing issues. That's how children develop, and that's how they learn language. So this, you know, we know, don't we, that language is only a tiny bit the words, you know, that we say. And with these masks, all these barriers, it just concerns me that we don't even know the gravitas of the impacts on children and young people yet. And that's, yeah, I can't even get my head around it, to be fair. I mean, as mental health practitioners, I mean, how can you combat that?
It's also difficult to get the support for the children. A friend was telling me the other day that she or a friend's friend had taken her son to the doctor because he's just so sad, with the words, he's so sad. And the doctor's response was, it's the school's issue. And you know, there's what I think a 2-year waiting list for CAMHS right now. Yeah. Certainly where I am in my area. And I mean, maybe that's why the doctor is saying that the school needs to deal with it, because actually the doctor can't deal with it right then and there. So they'll have to, you know, go seek private support, I guess. But yeah, really referring to children, I think challenging when there's a problem.
Felix, from your perspective, what do you feel is the psychological damage that is being done by the way things are, by the current status quo?
Oh gosh, where do you start? I mean, it's systemic damage, really. It's so many things. You hear anecdotes from people. A young girl was terrified to go and meet other people, even though she's been vaccinated. They've been vaccinated just in case she gets infected in some way. So the fear levels are sky high. People aren't thinking straight. We're disconnected from what used to recharge us, what used to keep us more balanced and even and grounded. At the same time, the fear levels are elevated. So it's just a perfect storm in so many ways. If I wanted to devise some kind of mental health neutron bomb, it'd be along these lines, to be honest with you. It'd be disconnecting people from families, from activities, from things that recharge and make them feel close as part of a community. Even make going out in nature problematic. You see people in the park wearing masks when there's no one, around them. You elevate the fear levels. You wash your hands even if you don't need to. You make things excessive, and you put the fear of death into young children, very impressionable and formative. And so now there's a mental health time bomb that's going to swamp the place very soon. I mean, I don't want to go on and on. It's going to be a little bit depressing, but that's why I'm here. It's so many concerns and so many different levels. Just to get back to core nature very quickly. My favorite part of the day is walking my dog in the morning. There I am with my dog in nature, breathing fresh air. I'll choose that over TV. And this is how we evolved. We're walking with our group, with our tribe, stretching, moving things out the way, picking things up, lifting something, moving, stretching, breathing in air, doing things together as a community. That's how we evolved. And everything is about compartmentalizing that now. And, the world is shrinking a little screen and we don't really interact. You've got people in different parts of the house on their phone. So we really, obviously, I'm a great advocate of getting back to the core values that it's like the paleo diets, isn't it? It's like people say, well, that's what we kind of evolved on for so many years. That's what's good for our body. I don't know if it is or not, but it's that kind of idea. We've got to get back to what made us sane and what made us happy in a community.
So this is interesting because obviously we've clearly come very far away from what we need to flourish, to have happiness and well-being and that connection and that sense of community. And I guess, Emma, what I'd like to get your perspective on is these are things that we could change. We could change this quite quickly. We saw what happened in football a couple of weeks ago, where the big American money men and a few other nationalities as well, but primarily Americans, tried to basically buy out the people's game. And everyone came together. The fans, the players, the managers, the pundits, even politicians. Yes, obviously they were jumping on the bandwagon because they want to look good. And I'm not sure if they actually really care about football. But the point is, everyone came together and 48 hours, the whole thing collapsed. Yeah. Because enough people cared to create change. Now, this is just my perspective, my opinion, but is it people just don't care enough, which is why things don't change? Or is it there's polarity or people are being divided in their perspectives? What do you think on that? Because I feel we could create change if we all came together and sang the same song at the same time.
I think what you've just described is something that makes perfect sense on one level. So we see a problem, we revolt against it to create a solution. But that was a very simplistic model. So all of the football fans could see very clearly, this is what we're going to lose, and this is how we're going to respond to that loss, and we all have a common interest. And that in itself created the energy and a very fast change. So that is an example of how when people come together, you can literally change a system and a circumstance. When it comes down to what's happened in our present experience, what Felix has been saying, Michelle, what Juliet has been saying, etc., is that this has come from a place of trauma. So essentially, the trauma that initially many people felt was going to be catastrophic, as in the initial experience of what we believed we were facing, that undermined confidence. So that means that there isn't necessarily a common understanding of experience. Mm-hmm. And then from there has been so many changes that's been instrumental to keeping us confused that asking for people to come together with a common belief system has almost become a problem where instead of it uniting, it divides. So as much as on one level there is people like ourselves saying for mental health we are in crisis, for children we are in crisis, unless we actually allow people their own autonomy and freedom and we get rid of this idea of this very authoritarian state, we are heading for something catastrophic, not just on a mental health level, but on a whole societal experiential culture level. The problem with that is that many people, and it's many people, have not had the same experience. So if I think about somebody who's one of the 3 million excluded, who've had no financial support, who've lost their homes, who are sleeping in cars, clearly for them there is a motivation, a real motivation to join and express and try to affect change. They don't get, unfortunately, the notoriety and the help within the main media to make that change happen. So we have people wanting to, but without necessarily a voice. Same when people protest, they don't necessarily have a voice because it's not necessarily covered. But on the other side, we have people who actually, if you ask them, have your government provided for you well, they would say, yes, you know, I've been at home, I've had 18 months nearly where I felt less pressure, I haven't had to worry about money, I've not even had to work. And we can't be angry with those people because work-life balance is another blueprint that's broken. People are shockingly overworked. So therefore, as opposed to it being in that experience of the football, the people against the elite, the people against those in power, it's become the people divided against one another with a powerlessness and a helplessness on one side, with people acting out and rising up, but on the other, people who equally don't feel that level of passion because it's not necessarily been as bad as it could have been. So even though we see that in the end that's going to have long-term implications for both sides, which is going to be terrible, as in for mental health and wellness, you do need to make your own choices. You don't need to be traumatized, and you do need to believe that your society is one that's connected and community orientated for mental wellness. That's not where we are in this moment in time, which is a big problem, which is why we do things like this. But even in context of this, for all of us talking now, even that puts people like ourselves in positions at risk, because to be honest, there is a narrative that does not allow you to try to talk about these things openly and honestly, which makes again people fear, which means that unlike the football, that's why they don't raise up.
Can I say something?
Point, because
well?
we've all been attacked and abused in some way for being willing and daring to stand up and speak out. And I think that in itself is an important point. How many people are just staying silent for fear of repercussions? Now, we've got so much polarity. Now, this is just my opinion, but this is a Roman strategy, divide and conquer. You know, what did Machiavelli teach us in The Art of War? If you want to defeat the enemy, get them fighting each other so they're not fighting you. And that's really where we got to. And I think particularly this Mental Health Awareness Week, it's really important that we lay down our arms against each other and think, look, we're in this together. We are one society. We are one community. What happens to one affects the others. You might be living in a 5-bedroom house in Hertfordshire with a big garden, a nice bedroom. But there are people living in tower blocks in Moss Side and Solihull and Hackney that don't have that. And if they're compromised because they can't work in bars and restaurants and hotels, and that affects them, that affects us all because we're all connected. We're all cells of an organism. So, yeah, sorry, Juliet, Anya, I know you've got something to add.
But just referring back to the football, I think as well with the football, it was a kind of finite decision, wasn't it? So it was if this happens, then this happens forever. Whereas with what's happening now, it's almost like that. Is it dangling carrots? What's the word? You know, they're like it's always like in a week it's going to be better, in a month it's going to be better, and there's people in these terrible situations like you talk about, Neil, who sit there and they're in a dire situation. You know, some people really extreme situations, but are just thinking, okay, I've just got to get through the next month. That's all I've got to get through, and then they manage it, and then the next month suddenly something else, and it gets to the point where it just crashes. And I guess that's where we're all at. I mean, we're sat here, we're helping other people with their mental health. We're all okay, but we all see people who aren't okay. And I think we have that fear because we see that. But when you're that person who's thinking, well, it's going to be all right in a month, then there's a feeling of not needing to come together, not needing that camaraderie to make the change because it's going to be all right in a month, and so we just get through the month. Whereas, you know, the football, it was going to be forever, and so they needed to fight it.
Using a football analogy, the constantly moving goalposts, I think, is probably the analogy I would use.
Yeah.
So, Anya, why are people so afraid to talk about their problems and open up when it comes to mental health issues? Why is there still such a stigma?
Well, the thing is, I think the biggest issue here is that, the world authorities are focusing on the infectious aspects of the pandemic, while mental health disorders are rising up and being ignored. And, it's not covered by media. No one is talking about it. We are just talking about the death rates, which promotes more fear, more anxiety. And, people don't really even have time to reflect because they are put in the alarm state of like, you need to wear a mask, you need to protect your loved ones. We all seen campaigns of, sad faces and like, you need to wear a mask if you want to see your grandpa or, And the thing is, like, I think because we are promoting fear, and that's why we don't even want to speak about mental health, because that's not the core problem here. It's like we need to protect each other, but people don't really understand that the suicide rates went up, that people are extremely stressed out, extremely anxious. There is a huge need for help, and there is not enough service provided to that help. As you posted the other day, that journalist who lost his son because he was put on the 6 months waiting list for the therapy and he taken his life. So there is a huge demand on support for mental health, but there is no services that are providing it.
Can I just unpick this? And I'm really interested in all of your perspectives on this. I'm not a doctor, but I've been doing this for long enough to kind of have a basic understanding of biology. Because exactly as you said, Anya, we've got a need to protect people's health, right? And to prevent people from getting sick. So all of these social distancing, mask wearing, sanitizing has been to prevent infections and prevent people from getting sick, as I understand it. How many of you, during periods of stress, have got ill? That's a basic biological fact. Anyone watching today, I would encourage you to Google that. When you are stressed, your immune system is suppressed and you're more susceptible to illness. When you're exposed to messages that create fear and anxiety, I'm sure you all agree that creates stress. Stress suppresses the immune system, leaving you more susceptible to illness. Putting up posters and TV campaigns that scare the crap out of people surely has the reverse effect of what you're looking for. It might get them to do what you want them to do, but does it protect them? No, it doesn't. Because actually scared people, that will find that they are significantly more exposed and likely to get ill. And anyone that's ever got sick during a stressful period knows that this is the case. Your immune system is the first line of defense, right? More so than social distancing, mask wearing and sanitizing, you want to have a strong immune system, unless obviously you've got underlying health conditions, which I totally appreciate could lead to other factors. So the point I'm making here, wouldn't it have made more sense for us to be empowering people and saying, guess what, guys, you really need to take the time to look after your health, to eat healthy, to exercise, to meditate, to sleep well, etc. And if you're going to take extraordinary courses of action to ensure people stay healthy, rather than shutting down gyms and nail salons and spas and massage therapists and stop people from socializing and doing yoga, if you're going to take extreme course of action, wouldn't it be better to ban the sale of alcohol, nicotine, sugar, junk food? I don't know. I'm not an expert here, but I don't know what you guys think. Logically, would that make more sense?
But I think that they wouldn't make a lot of money doing that. That's the key, isn't it? Health.
So it's about protecting lives. It's not about saving lives.
But then keeping healthy people quarantined and not letting people go out in the sunlight regularly and keeping us away from other germs, because that's what our immunity needs. And then on top of that, giving us a stressful period. Any medic, if they're honest, it's basic biology. We all know that. I mean, everyone knows that. I don't know why we're even talking about the fact that social isolation could ever have been seen as a good thing, when we all know that up until 2020, the NHS themselves said that one of the biggest killers is social isolation. So it's not like we're quoting things that are unknown. I'm quoting that directly from the NHS that said that social isolation essentially is as powerfully bad for you as something like a very poor diet or even smoking, even though public health argued with me on screen once saying that wasn't the case when I'd taken it from their research. The point is there are a lot of truths that have since been, shall we say, avoided. And I think that because of that, again, if enough people start to say the same things, then in the end, it's the conformity approach. We know that. We know that people find it more difficult. The more people are conforming, the more people will continue to, because people feel afraid of being the one who gets excluded. And that's really hard for humans. I have a lot of empathy and sympathy with people either who are highly traumatized because they've not had what their needs are met and they've been traumatized by other advertising. But I've also got this like feeling of, wow, you know, how long has it been that we're becoming more of this amalgamated just mush of people just having to say and think the same? And what's that doing to our society and our curiosity and ingenuity and all the things that make us happy? I don't know what Felix thinks, but I would imagine, Felix, from a psychological point of view, one of the things that we spend our lives doing in therapeutic practice is we do our best to try to help people come to terms with the fact that they are unique individuals. You know, they are completely within their own rights to make their own decisions. And yes, we want to aspire for them to have hope. And yes, we want to encourage them to be healthy. But actually, what we really want to do is to say, you know, find your unique self, your autonomy. And surely for you as a psychologist, apart from being massively frustrated and disconnected to a lot of the research that we know exists that now has suddenly been, shall we say, sidelined for new research, it must be quite challenging for you when you're trying to help get this message across of what makes a healthy human, to kind of be also going, everything I've spent my training doing has been essentially not only deconstructed, but alienated from reality in the past 12 months.
Yeah, absolutely bang on, really. I mean, we come back to, you know, the research is very simple. You study what makes a human healthy and thriving. You find those needs. This is what the Human Givens Organization's done. And you create an environment where those needs are met. I mean, it's not really rocket science. And you know, as you know, everyone here, the opposite has been happening. It's almost like, how do you make a human being really kind of damaged in a way, because that's what's happening. And it's like you're not allowed to die from COVID, but you're allowed to die from everything else, you know, which is sort of, you know, what's the end game? We've said this before. You know, all this excessive drive for safety leaves you, you know, psychologically, emotionally, physically sort of harmed and scarred. And, you know, you have some kind of pros and cons, cost benefit analysis going on, which is not. And, you know, everything that's said today, I'm just, you know, listening, nodding, and slightly depressed because it seems so obvious in some ways. The divide and conquer, the carrot and stick, you know, let's just change the goalposts a little bit. So slippery slope. Almost there, almost there. Oh, sorry, actually, we've got to do a U-turn, but almost there next time. And it's just, people are so tired and so sort of, you know, from multiple sources that they're just hoping this is true. It's sorry, you know, to use this past example, but I did a brief research into sort of serial killers and things like this, and they find out, you know, what they do is they don't want a victim to fight. They say, listen, just do what I say, you'll be okay. That's the worst thing you can do. You've got to fight tooth and nail because this person doesn't intend to let you live and be a witness. But, you know, oh, please don't hurt me, and I'll just do anything you say, just don't hurt me. It's like, that's what they're counting on. So, it's this, I don't know, this sort of disconnect from what's really going on. And I don't think it's really, you know, rocket science, what's going on. It's glaringly obvious.
Yeah.
A lot of people, you don't have to have a trained psychologist.
I just wanted to ask a question to you guys as mental health practitioners, because obviously there's so much going on at the moment. A lot of it we can't control. So you almost have to kind of put that to one side, in a certain extent, especially with kids. So if we're looking at what we can control, how do we within this uncontrolled situation try and control things for our children to just make it that little bit easier? I mean, how do we maintain like some kind of normality or some kind of healthy environment for their mind within this crazy environment? I mean, what's your advice?
Well, I pick up on that because that's a really important point, because, you know, Emma talked about sort of that social isolation, which, you know, firstly, just to echo Emma's point, we knew this was an issue in 2018 based on a study that came out. The government actually employed for the first time in our history as a country, a government minister responsible for loneliness, which was then classified as a chronic mental health condition, right? That was long before we even had a sniff of COVID-19. So we knew this was an issue then, and the predictions at that point was by 2023 it will be affecting a third of the population. Children were not classified as part of that. Generally, it was affecting sort of older people or people that live by themselves or so on and so forth. You know, Michelle, exactly as you picked up, for me, the biggest concern is putting children into social isolation. How much do you learn by way of osmosis? How much do children learn by playing and interacting with others? How they learn about communicating and body language and just really how to show up as a human being in a social setting? When you deprive an adult in their 20s, 30s or 40s of 8, 9, 10, 11 months of their life, it's a long time and it will have an effect. When you deprive a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old child of a year of their life will never be the same. They are damaged for life. I mean, we know, particularly those that are in the therapeutic field, a child that has a trauma in early childhood, that will template their behaviors from that point onwards, unless there is some kind of psychological intervention or some kind of trauma therapy. Are we starting a campaign of national / global trauma therapy for all the children that have been scarred by this? Now, again, obviously, Juliet, Felix, Emma, I know you're working more directly with people, but I think for me, I totally echo your point. This is something we do need to take action about. At this point, I'm not really seeing conversations around where's the national program of trauma recovery, because that's what we need. We need a government minister that's going to take responsibility for healing a generation of children that have not only been scarred emotionally by this situation, they're expected to pay for this. For the rest of their life, they'll be paying for all the mess and all the bailouts and all the furloughs and all the rest of it. After a lot of the ministers that made those decisions are long gone, there will be children today that will still be paying for the cost of that. So I'm sorry, that's something that does upset me. What do you guys think? Julia, you guys got some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've got something to say. So I think there's a large percentage of society that are now out there. They've forgotten the problems. They're out having fun. They're living the life. They're at the pubs, they're socializing with friends, they're doing everything that we should do and they're having a great time. And then there's another proportion of society that are traumatized. And I just want to refer to the NHS description on their website of health anxiety. And I want to relate that to the past year. So the first one is constantly worrying about your health. There's a lot of people that have been constantly worrying about their health. Frequently checking your body for signs of illness. How many people had that app where you track your symptoms every day? Always asking people for reassurance that you're not ill. The current government campaign is for everybody to take 2 lateral flow tests a week. You can pick them up for free. So you're always asking people for reassurance. Worrying that a doctor or medical test may have missed something. Massive concern over false positive, false negatives. Obsessively looking at health information on the internet or in the media. You couldn't get away from it. Even if you didn't want to look at it, you couldn't get away from it. Acting as if you were ill. The order from the government was to behave as if you have COVID. The only thing out of every single one of their symptoms that everyone hasn't been doing for the past year is avoiding anything to do with serious illness, such as medical TV programs. That's the only one. So out of 7 symptoms of health anxiety, there's only one that we haven't been instructed to do as the norm. And when we practice things like this, we become better at them. And so many people, a large percentage of the society, have been practicing health anxiety really, really well for the past year. And that means they're really good at it. And so now there is that percentage of society who are out there having a great time. But there's a bulk of people who are stuck with, it's a real struggle to just stop practicing those things. And so there's, they're in that struggle of kind of this need to carry on doing it. And I think that's where we talked last week on this mental health clinic about how screen connection isn't the same as face-to-face connection. There's research on it. And back in the beginning of this pandemic, the very initial lockdown, when we really were completely locked down, screen connection was brilliant, wasn't it? Weren't we lucky to have it? Because We had no other way of connecting with people, but now we can connect with people. And I, you know, I'm here. I don't agree with these restrictions, but they're there. And so they were there, and we did what we could to get through them. But now we can go out. And so it's these people with this health anxiety, which they might not realize it's health anxiety, but it's all the symptoms of health anxiety. It's really about doing the opposite of practicing it, unpracticing it, if you like. If you were going to go for an A star in your health anxiety exam, you've got to go for a fail. And just stop doing all of those things. Have a look at those symptoms of health anxiety and start doing the opposite. And it's really important, I think, for every adult as an individual. But going back to Michelle's focus on children, if you're an adult and you're in this situation, it's about, you know, some proactive action to turn yourself around so that you can get your children out, so that we don't now have a generation of children with health anxiety or growing into adults with health anxiety.
Yeah, I know, Emma, you've spoken about the fact that you know, many children are developing OCD behaviours. My niece came over a couple of months ago, and she washed her hands like 17 times while she was here. It was a couple of hours. She's like 7. And I was like really traumatized at watching that kind of behavior, because she's been templated with that.
Mm. Yeah.
And you know, Neil, can I just say, the thing with that is, if you overwash your hands, you leave them more susceptible to infection.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, all the harshness of all the oils and the soaps they're using. So it's actually counterproductive. But they're washing it because they're told, even if you don't need to wash your hands every 20 minutes or whatever the case may be. So it's just for their sake. Yeah.
I mean, I think that children have been sacrificed. I just think that's the word. I think we've sacrificed children. I mean, it tends to be the case. Look back at the wars, even though we talk about old people who fought in the wars. No, they didn't. They were 16. It was young people. It's always young people who get sacrificed. We might not want to talk about that, but that's the reality. And it's usually poor kids who get really sacrificed. And again, history will evidence everything I've just said. And what we're doing now is we're doing the same. All of the conversations that we have, from calling them vectors of disease, to suggesting they can kill their grandparents, to suggesting that they need to be treated with certain things to protect the wider society as opposed to themselves. This is crazy talk.
So you're putting foreign agents, experimental agents in your body to protect not yourself, but someone else.
It's all crazy talk. It's crazy talk, and it's taken a lot of indoctrination for that crazy talk to become mainstream, but it's there. But what we've got to do now with our children, it's much like the first time I had a health visitor come to my home with my new premature baby. I had been taught, you know, make sure everything was extremely clean. She walked in, she saw the cleaner on the unit, she took it, she put it in the bin, she said, put him on the floor as often as possible, get him filthy. The minute you can get him outside, let him eat whatever he can find, whatever dirt that is. And I took that advice to heart, and I let him go out and do that. My children have broken arms climbing trees. I am glad. I am grateful. They've learned that they heal. My children have been in situations at risk where I might not have wanted them to do it, but I'm glad they did, because it makes them brave. They know that the prompt of fear is to create courage. They know that the prompt of anger is to find soothing. That's what you need to do with your children. You need to make them, for example, one of my sons decided that when he went to the loos in the public areas, he wouldn't wash his hands because he wanted germs, because he believes his immunity requires it. And I was proud of him. I was proud of him for making that choice. I myself has chosen not to wash hands a great deal, because to me, I know that I need my immunity boosted. Also, I think with children, we need to start seeing what kind of role models are we going to be for them. Do you want your child being brought up believing that life is full of risk? If you're going to do that, that's on you. But that means your child will not live fully, will not live freely. They will not reach their best standards. They certainly won't attain the dreams and goals and aspirations that they wish for. And they will have relationships that are not as good as they should be. They will be submissive and subservient to others because they believe that there is always something to be afraid of. If you want that for your children, then obviously that's a choice you can make personally. If I heard somebody say that to me, I would think instantly, oh my God, am I part of that problem? Do I want my child at 25 coming home being nowhere near the human being they were born to be, because I made them feel that anything could be a risk. And let me put it in this way. Parents out there who are listening to this, you have been taught a worst case scenario. That is what Sage do. It's their job. I'm not having a go at them. You know, if that's your bag and you want to go and teach people worst case scenarios, you take a job doing that. Not for me. I think about best case scenarios, because you know what? That makes me feel joy. So worst case scenario planning is like this. How many people might get sick? Ooh, it could be millions, and we might lose 500,000 people. That sounds terrifying, right? That's worst case scenario planning. Likewise, this goes the same this way. Car. What was the worst case scenario? You get in it, you crash, you kill a whole family, you die. Never get in the car. Worst case scenario planning made simple. You've all had that for a year. You can't teach your children that. You teach your children the minimal needs of risk awareness, which is ideally don't go off with strangers. But again, you've got to do that in a way that's pacifistic and kind. Secondly, do go and climb trees. Just remember to go for the branches that are sturdy. And you've got to help them go and make decisions about all of their choices. Because if you don't, you're going to make them live in a room on a headset, scared. And let me tell you, I'm not against gaming. I love gaming. I think it's brilliant. I think technology is incredible, but it's crap unless it's got balance. So I would say that children need to be indoctrinated with risk against fear, in my opinion.
We've got a viewer question in, which is actually very fitting with what you've just shared there, Emma. Dear Neil, how do we inspire people to connect physically with others in community and fellowship when so much fear has been touted? How do we stop people from seeing others as dangerous biohazards? When will common sense be restored if people continue to act as though we are still in the midst of the bubonic plague by continuing to hide their smile behind an oxygen-depleting mask? Human touch is the most restorative practice, whether it be a hug, a healing massage, or a simple handshake. I've always refused to give people the elbow instead of a handshake. Orphan babies die without human touch, regardless of the food and drink supply. Touch is our human inner nature, and no politician should ever have the authority to insist that we disconnect from our inner natures. This is very much in fitting with the theme and very much what you shared at the beginning, Anya. We can all hug trees, but the trees don't hug back. Only a human can hug you back and hug you back better. This is perhaps a better slogan for billboards. Best regards, Susan. It's not so much a question, but she's made some pretty strong statements, which I think align with everything we've been saying. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
I've got something I've been thinking about this as well, actually, because I saw a friend recently, and she, a bit of a story, but basically she arrived somewhere and met another friend, and she had a really hard time in the previous 10 minutes, and the friend saw this and ran straight to her and gave her a massive hug, and it was lovely, and that was great. But then when she got home, the friend texted my friend, or, you know, whatever, WhatsApp these days, we don't text, do we? She messaged my friend and said, I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have hugged you. Like, in the moment, I just did it, and I forgot that we're not supposed to hug. And my friend, you know, texts back, of course you should have hugged me. I needed the hug, and I'm very grateful you did. And I had a similar experience. I bumped into a friend just yesterday, and I saw her, and I haven't seen her since the summer. And my initial reaction was to kind of throw my arms around her neck and give her a hug. I haven't seen her for like 6 months, and that's what I did. And then I thought afterwards, well, I don't know if she was happy with that. And I refused to message her and say sorry, because exactly, you know, like this person says, this writer says, this is completely normal. We need to be doing this, but it's really, really difficult because I'm sure, you know, us in our work, we talk to people about boundaries and putting boundaries up and then respecting boundaries. And if someone's decided they don't want to hug because of the government campaign, then we should respect that boundary, right? But then our belief is that we, you know, as mental health practitioners, we know the importance of hugging. And it's a really, I don't know what we do here. What do we do? Do we just hug people and assume, you know, cross boundaries if they don't want it? Should we be saying to people, do you hug? It's really challenging. And this is obviously part of the problem, and we could talk about the problems for the next 3 hours, but what's
Absolutely.
the solution? I don't know.
And I think that's a good point, and I do really want to spend some time talking about how do we make things better. And I think, Anya, being, not only a professional in the field, but being the parent of a young child that will not remember what it was like pre-COVID because he's too young. What has been your perspective and your observations?
On my child and how he is dealing. But the thing is, when we were in London, we are now in Spain, and things are a bit different here. People can meet on the street, but you need to wear a mask wherever you go. But in London, I really felt the change with Ian because, we couldn't see friends, we didn't see anyone, he wasn't seeing the kids. The first lockdown, even the parks were closed, so he couldn't go into the park. And I did get worried in terms of like, wait, he's missing a huge thing in his life, which is social contact, interaction, where he's going to learn from. I can play with him and interact with him to some level, but he needs his peers the same age in order to learn and interact, in order to develop emotionally, socially, intellectually. And it is very worrying. And I just want to come back to the point where we are talking about like everyone knows that mental health is important. I really don't think they do. And that's why the Mental Health Awareness Week exists, because people absolutely don't understand that there is no health without mental health, which we discussed last time. And, and that's why we were inspired at in the Stress Management Society with the team Nature to connect to our core nature, but connecting to our actually 5 core aspects, the mental, the physical, emotional, social, and spiritual. So having all those needs met in order for us to thrive. And, these are also interlinked and cannot go one without another. So having a child that, is deprived of social interaction is gonna have an impact on his emotional well-being and vice versa. So, yeah.
So as we get into the business end of our discussion, you've introduced these 5 core pillars that are required for us to have optimal well-being and happiness. Let's just start unpicking them. And I think this is an opportunity for us to start thinking about what can we do? What are the actions that we can take to really start to rebuild our well-being, our resilience? So, obviously you started with mental. For me, mental is what's going on up here. So I think there's certain things we should focus on and other things we should avoid. So this is a great opportunity for you guys to share your thoughts and perspectives on what can people do to start improving their mental well-being, because obviously part of that is what goes in there, and also what we're doing to work with what's already in there. So have you guys got any thoughts around what people can do to improve kind of their mental perspective?
I think one thing, Neil, is like-minded people need to get together, because there's a lot of people who feel similarly. You sort of see them come into my consulting room and they worry, how are you with this and that? And, once they realize that I'm not draconian about it, they relax as well, but they're worried I might be. So I think like-minded people, I sort of have this image. It's going to be like the way America was founded. People found all this oppression just too much, so they went off and started colonies and communities together. I can see us sort of getting together and saying, you know what? Where's a place in England where people can still hug each other and eat and live in the old-fashioned way? And let's all go and
invest in this place for a while and live together.
Yeah, we're all signing up.
Right.
Yeah, Costa Rica.
Breakaway state. It's going to be something along those lines. So it's like-minded people. Whenever I meet like-minded people, you just renews your faith a little bit. Like, oh, thank God, there's some people here who aren't all overcome by the crazy. So I think we need to get together and take that next level in some ways. That's one thing. That
may actually come up again when we talk about the social pillar of well-being. But has anyone else got any thoughts around what we're doing with what's going on up here?
Yeah, I would say starting with doing the opposite of those symptoms of health anxiety. So constantly worrying about your health. I mean, that's a difficult one to just switch off. But thought stopping, I like, that proactive action of every time a negative thought comes in, saying out loud to yourself, if necessary, stop.
Yeah.
And then actively thinking something else. Frequently checking your body for signs of illness. Well, stop tracking your symptoms. Just, stop it. Delete the app. Always asking people for reassurance that you're not ill. Take a test if you have symptoms that you don't know if you have because you've not checked, obviously. But, if you're ill, you feel ill. And I get with COVID, people are asymptomatic. But do we really need to be testing twice a week for something that we've probably not got? Worrying that a doctor or medical test may have missed something. Well, if you're not doing the test, you don't need to worry. Obsessively looking at health information on the internet, and that's the key. I think really switching off from it.
Is this when Juliet brings out her new range of handy buzzers, like wear around your neck, and whenever you have it, just stop it.
Mother Juliet.
Just like hang on.
I think it's really, really important to actually, be self-aware and start practicing that. Like practicing, like just catching your thought pattern. Like, what is your thought pattern? Like, what are you talking to yourself? What's going on in your head? Like quieting yourself down to listen what's going on. And, that's not easy. And there are obviously things that we can do in order to do that. Again, walking in the nature, it's great, because that's where we can disconnect maybe and just connect to ourselves, to our inner nature and to our mental processing and to our thoughts and to our thought pattern, and really see how do we talk to ourselves. Are we going and worrying about, this one is not wearing a mask, this one is too close? Or, I'm enjoying the fresh air, I'm outside in the nature, I'm walking, I'm moving my body. It's just that really recognizing what's happening inside our head.
I think with children,
worrying about symptoms and stuff, and you could have an itch and you Google your symptoms and Google tells you you've got herpes. I know. I don't have
a. With children, I was going to say with kids.
That's a possible thing you can do. It's like look it up and start stressing, because little things in your head you'll build it up to something it's actually not. Yeah. So I think that's a really, really good point. But also picking up on another one of Juliet's traits, and you talked about unplugging. Juliet has a day every week on a Thursday where she turns her phone off. It's an absolute nightmare because Thursday's clinic day, and I can never get
today. There was too much pressure for this today. It stayed on.
One thing I was just going to quickly say, sorry, Neil, it's just about the sometimes, particularly with kids, rather than asking to stop doing something, it's easier to get them to do something. So rather than saying stop thinking about something, give them something to replace it with. So some kind of mindful hobby or something, just something to kind of replace it might be a better way forward. I mean,
it's a good point.
Can I add something actually, Michelle? I think that the children are the only, human beings being in the present moment fully. It's just with the age that we start then, getting disrupted and start getting involved in other things, and the thought processing are developing then, and then we start having these patterns. But the child is like fully living in the moment, and we can learn so much through them, because like with me and Ian, I see him and he plays and stuff, he's just mesmerized in the moment, and you can see it so obviously, and it's amazing and it's beautiful. And I had that insight, and I was like, oh my God, yes, like when I was a child I used to be in the moment and live fully in the moment, and now I'm doing all these practices to come back to my core, how I was at the beginning, how I was created as a beginning, as a child, living in the present moment, but then everything else takes you away from that and just programs you in different ways to stop living in present and living in your head, worrying about future or dwelling in the past.
It's an important point, and I think just to extract the key essence of what you guys have shared there, one of my areas of expertise is linguistics. And if I say to you, don't think of a big fat politician with messed up hair, like what are you thinking of right now? Okay, it's a bad example, but you're all thinking of a big fat politician with messed up hair right now, right? Because the moment not to do something, you cannot help but to do that. Why is that?
Yeah.
Because what does your brain process? It doesn't process it, don't think. It thinks, think of big fat politician with messed up hair, don't. It processes it in the positive, then negates it. So if you tell a child, don't be naughty, they have to think about naughty before they negate it. Or don't run, or don't be stupid. And, you know, this is something you can use like quite, manipulatively. Like, you know, when we finish this, I mean, you can turn around to Pete and say, oh, Pete, don't worry about washing up that teacup. I'll do it later. He has to think about washing up the teacup. He's like, no, Emma, it's fine. I'll do it. The point I'm making, one of the things I've been spending a lot of time researching over the last 7 or 8 months is the behavioral psychology, the nudge theories, the kind of all of the manipulative strategies that have been employed to keep us compliant, right? So you tell people not to do something, or you put out these negative statements, they have to process it in the positive to then negate it. So exactly as you said, why were we not putting out positive messages in the first place?
I also think, though, that we have to start being personally responsible and accountable. So I think to those people who are listening, you have to start saying to yourself, because you're an individual. If somebody said to you, eat that pizza, and you don't like pizza, you're going to be like, no, because I don't like pizza. My research, evidently, in my experience of eating pizza, creates the reaction where I don't like it. That's because you were born to think for yourself. And also, if somebody walks into a room and somebody says, you should really like this person, but you've just seen that person be really negative to somebody that you like, the fact that the person's telling you like that person, you're going to go, my gut says I've just seen them doing something I don't like. I don't know whether I'm going to like that person. You're going to diligently explore the world for yourself. When did you stop doing that? Mm-hmm. When are you going to ask yourself the question, when did I buy in to what somebody else was telling me? Because I can tell you this, throughout history, and there's not just one example throughout history, there are millions. It is when you stop thinking for yourself and you blindly follow a crowd that often, when you reach the front, you realize that it was not a very good decision to make. You stop trusting yourself. If you want to reframe, if you really want to do yourself some good mentally right now, stop listening and start looking for your own evidence. And this is the big one. If you ever want to do psychological research, Felix will have done this in his doctorate. Lots of people who do research will understand this. You don't just go for the bias. There's no point in that. If I go for the popular bias, well, I can support my hypothesis, but then I'll have it peer reviewed and they'll ruin it, because you know what? My methodology won't have been appropriate. I will not have looked at conflicting data, and I will not have been able to have collaborated and connected that in a way that I can express that I fulfill the hypothesis that I particularly believe in. Right now, no one's doing that. Just because you think somebody is crazy over there with their ideas, if they seem to be happily functioning and getting on about their business and don't seem to be affected trauma-wise, ask yourself a question, why? Because to me, if they seem to be functioning really healthily and happily and getting on with their lives, then I'm going to look at that data and say, they seem to be in a better place than me. What is it that they are doing? What actions are they taking? What belief systems are they holding? What experiences are they having? What information are they learning that's giving them that confidence? And what are they disputing? At the moment, it feels very much like the reframe that needs to take place is, if all you have done is accepted, you have to diligently reflect on what you're willing to continue to believe in and what you're continuing to deflect and abandon, because that's what diligence is. That's what makes positive mental health. Because otherwise, if I'm in a coercively controlled relationship and my partner is saying to me, you just need to do this, this, and this, and I'm feeling broken and bruised, but I'm going to follow it because I'm being told what to do. But the people out there who are in really happy relationships are saying that I should be doing something different. I've got to look at my experience and look at theirs. And if it's a no-brainer, it's because it's a no-brainer. So start being more diligent. You can't have autonomy, empowerment, and self-power unless you do your own homework. That's how it works.
I think that's a really good point. If you're kind of just consuming mainstream media, everything that's on social media, which obviously is quite sanitized, that we've had a lot of people that have been deplatformed and had their posts removed. So we're not getting a full spectrum of valid information that's being made available to us. Your brain is going to be filled with one perspective. It's exactly you said, like part of this is exposing yourself to a broad spread of information, having the right data to be able to make clear decisions.
You can still go back to what you think. That's the deal. And also, this isn't about this year. This is about saying, how would you have done it 2 years ago, 3 years ago? You have to be diligent about your choices. When you go to a nursery with your child and you see somebody treating your child like shit, and there's a nursery down the road where the kids all seem really happy, just because somebody tells you they got a better Ofsted report, you go to the one where your kid's happy. You do the research. And it's the same in psychological research, physiological research, medical research. Look before the year that we had. Then form some conclusions. It's not about conspiracy. It's not about even trying to change your opinion. It's about saying you don't get an opinion properly formed without exploring all the avenues that lead to that destination.
Now, I think, Emma, you've given us a nice segue onto the next one, which is emotional. And I think what's happened is over the last year, because we're in a state of fear, we are not trusting our own gut instinct. We're not following what feels right, what we know to be right.
Let's get the charger.
That's being overridden by the fear that we're experiencing. Why is the emotional pillar so important for us to really trust what we feel, and also to have the chance for true, meaningful emotional expression and connection at a time where fear seems to be the only currency that the only emotion that we seem to be expressing? So, you got any thoughts on that, Michelle? Again, with the work that you do within the community and what you've seen and observed, what is your perspectives on that?
Well, I don't even know where to start. I mean, yeah, I'm gonna have to. I'm not sure, to be fair, Neil. I just think that perspective is so different for everyone at the moment. So like if I put on my nurse's hat, and then I compare myself to all the other nurses out there, there's so many different people saying so many different things that it's really quite difficult. I'm gonna pass on that question because I just need to think about it a bit more, if that's all right.
Cool. No worries. So, anyone else got any thoughts around sort of the fact that we've been deprived of emotional connection, and also, as Emma was so clearly saying, that many of us are not trusting our own gut instinct. We're not trusting our own emotional reactions. There are things that will feel right and things that clearly feel wrong. But because we've been literally, templated with fear of the overriding emotion, that suppresses all other emotional expression, and that means a lot of people are not trusting themselves. They're not listening to what feels right, and this is why us building and developing the emotional pillar of well-being is so important, because we need to get back to the point where we trust what we know to feel right. So if anyone's got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, as Emma said, I mean, the reason is we're being told a bunch of things are good for us, but because of our training, we know otherwise. So saying, well, that's not actually going to work. That's actually counterproductive to mental health, because we have the knowledge to counter it. So I'm saying to people, get this knowledge, because a lot of people are being told stuff saying, oh, okay, that must be for the best. They're just believing it hook, line and sinker, rather than that, well, actually there's more to the story. So people listening to this will realize that mental health is important, and that sort of needs need to be met. They need to know what those needs are. I mean, we'll happily explain at length, but people need to get educated about what they need to put in place so that they maintain their sanity and their mental health. Because at the moment, they're just believing what they're being told. You've got to be able to question it. And obviously the problem is when you do question it, you've got these labels flying everywhere, and that puts people off. So, but this is the fight. This is the fight of our lives. This is where courage comes in. You've got to fight, for what is right, and it's going to be tough. But the alternative is it's going to be worse. So people have.
Just want to be sure that we're leaving people with some action, something positive they can take away. So do we improve our emotional well-being? How do we improve our emotional health at a time where still so much is being denied of us? We still have restrictions on what we do, when we do it, how we do it, who we do it with, and even what we wear whilst we're doing it. So what are the suggestions that we can give to people listening today around what they can do to start improving their emotional well-being, their emotional health?
I feel like people need to give themselves a break a little bit. I've spoken to quite a few people recently who almost haven't realised how much the past year has affected them. So in general, they've survived. They've been able to keep a roof over their head. They've been able to eat good food. They've, their basic needs have been met. And, we say we should live in the moment and we should enjoy the journey. And that's all very well when there are things to enjoy. But when every day is full of things that are not enjoyable, it's okay doing the not enjoyable things when it's offset with a whole load of enjoyable things. Mm-hmm. But when there's no offsetting, and when everything is just a meeting a basic need, and there's very little enjoyment and pleasure, and I don't think we have to live these high-flying lives where we do all these amazing things. I'm very much a supporter of people who take themselves off grid and do live to survive, but that's a different thing because they're living a completely natural life. And they are working to live, and that may seem mundane and boring, but they're working to live. It's how we're supposed to live. It's aligned with how we evolved. But for people who aren't, who are living in our society in a what's considered normal way, but their lives aren't being offset with anything enjoyable, that's really, living in the moment is fine, but it's not enjoyable. And I think there's many people out there who think that they're just depressed, and they don't know why they're depressed, and they're trying to kind of fix a depression, and why am I depressed, and I just can't motivate myself, and I don't feel good, and I'm not even cooking for myself because I can't be bothered. And I've been trying to help people see that actually over the past year it's been really bad for you, even though you've got a great home and you've got a great family, and there's not been really much joy. You're not offsetting that everyday stuff with joyful things. And so when I've noticed people realizing actually maybe they have been affected, and maybe they're not wrong, and they're not broken, and they're not kind of in this situation they're never going to come out of, it's not their fault. Recognizing that it's not their fault, and it is helpful. I think there's a lot of people who might find some I don't know the word, relief in recognizing that actually you might be in a great situation financially, family-wise, health-wise, but your depression may well be a result of the past year, and you're not broken.
I think there's an important point for us to consider that, right now it's very easy to find reasons to be angry, to upset, to hate, to create further polarity. Particularly regarding the emotional pillar, one practice I feel is very, very important is the practice of unconditional positive regard. In layman's terms, that is love. That is to be able to show the expression of love and compassion, even to people that you don't agree with or may not on the face of it like. This is not an easy practice, but I think that's really the one thing that is going to start bringing us together and bringing us to a place of commonality and working towards a positive solution. So, whether it's the bus driver, the person in the supermarket, or that person may have even annoyed you or attacked you, rather than going to "I hate you" because you naturally will do that, is to be able to find the reason you love them. You don't need to say it out loud, but I try to do this practice with every person I encounter, particularly the ones that upset me or piss me off. And the phrase is very much, "I love you because." And it could be, "I love you because you show me something about myself I need to work with." Or, "I love you because you triggered some anger in me, which has made me realize I've still got something to work through to be at peace with that thing that you've upset me about." Because, like I said, it's easy to be angry. It's easy to be upset. It's a lot harder to show love and compassion, even to people that you don't like. And the real acid test is if you can, portray that towards particularly the political leaders and the people that have led us into this mess, and be able to find love and compassion for them. Not an easy task, but it's at that point.
All I can hear in that moment is me saying, "I love you because no one else will. You have more compassion. It doesn't work always for everybody, but I love it, but I must practice it more. I was just listening to Juliet and I was thinking, as one of the things that I keep saying on the lives that I do is for people who are feeling really depressed and down, like, acknowledge you're a normal human being. That's the great thing. If you feel utterly shit, if you find yourself resentful about a lot of things, if you find yourself feeling that everything that had meaning to you has just dissipated, know that you're well adjusted and stop thinking that there's something wrong with you. You are a human being put in a completely inhuman situation with an inhuman experience when you leave your home. It's toxic, it's wrong, it makes us feel terrible. Know that that is something that is giving you an instinct that there is a requirement for transition. I look at my own children. I've got a 16-year-old boy that has not gone back to school because the triggering experience after a period of trauma before he went into the position of lockdown and so on, we were dealing with personal trauma anyway. Seeing masks in school and having tests just taken to a terrible place. So one of the things I'd say to people out there who really want to deal with the emotional pillars is acknowledge what they are for you. And you don't have to do what other people tell you need to do. Like, if you really want to feel stronger, better, more human, ignore the things that are making you unwell and change them. Just because other people tell you that is the right way or inform you must, that isn't necessarily true at all. I must send my child back to school. No, not doing it because my emotional pillar in his says that's terrible for him right now. I'm not going to do things that I am told to do that are fundamentally terrible for my mental, physical, emotional, and social experience. And the reason for that is because I was not born on this planet to follow somebody else's set of rules. No one in my contract when I was born made me sign that, and I will not have it. And I know that that to people is terrifying, but that is not anti-establishment, nor is it revolutionary. This is not something of rebellion. This is something of acknowledging what a human being is. We are a human being. We are an animal. If you want to look at how wrong we've gone, 98.8% related to your primate cousin, all they do, particularly the bonobo chimps, is have sex, play, run around with each other and have fun, and generally care really hard for one another. That's our example of a good community. That's an example of an evolved community. We're devolving.
That's the community I want to set up, Emma.
Yeah. Sign me up.
There's a lot of sex. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
But Emma, what would you do though? I mean, in this situation, so it's I agree with you. You know, you don't have to do what people tell you to do. But it's difficult when it's goes along with your job, for example. So if someone's required to test for their job or required to mask for their job, or they want to take the kids out of school in September because everything inside them is saying gut instinct, I don't want them there, but they've got to send them there because school's an element of childcare for them and they're a single parent, or etc. etc. And I feel for these people because the freedom of choice isn't there when you're relying on all these this infrastructure to pay the rent and keep food in the fridge. And I feel for those people. And how do they cope when they can't make those choices?
I guess some of it, though, is that we always have to come back to a place of, if we don't think an individual can change the world, then how have individuals done it? Like, this is where we all get lost. What we say is, well, I don't know if I have any power, so I'll just go along with something that makes me feel powerless. So obviously, for somebody like myself, and all of you, we've put ourselves in positions of loss. Of course we have. But if we're not willing to do that, then nothing will change. So I would ask the people in those scenarios to start recognizing that their voices count. Like, if every single one of those single parents who needs childcare, who feels really unhappy, such as us for them, when they got together and decided that they're going to go against masks, they made a change. Listen, the one people, we never remember organizations. It was never conglomerates. It was never pharmaceutical companies either. It was none of those that made the world different. It was the Louis Pasteurs. It was the Gandhis. It was the Florence Nightingales. It was the people that we always remember. It was, our amazing suffragette sisters. It makes me laugh, actually, when people are like, any changes when pandemics were on. It's like 1918, it was a pretty serious pandemic. It's like probably the worst one we've known. And the suffragettes carried on. Like, individuals make differences. Like, know your power. It's something that you can do. Like, for me, it's not ideal, the fact that I will not allow my son back in school. But it's not because I'm being awkward. It's because it's right for him. And it's the same as people who are saying, well, I've got to do A, B, and C. It's like, well, okay, if you've got to do A, B, and C, what would make A, B, and C more comfortable? And what can you cope within that A, B, and C? And what can you change and challenge within it? Because if enough people start having that bravery, you literally transform the world. And I think at the moment, in the weirdest situation where we've never been as connected, we've never been as able to kind of express ourselves, it feels like social conditioning has become so much more powerful. So online, it's gone from being a place of freedom of thought where you can express yourself on social media to being imprisoned by groups of people who literally are sent to attack you and control you. So it's a bit like Juliet's doing and talking about there. If that's happening to you and it's breaking down your confidence, switch it all off. Just get rid of it all. You don't need to know that stuff. You need to know what's affecting me in this moment, in my community, in my society, with my situation. Don't go for the macro, go for the micro, because there will be so many other in your micro. But if you go on Twitter, you'll feel like you are the lone voice. You're not at all.
So there's some really important points that have been picked up on here. And, Emma, you said that when you were born, you didn't sign a contract. We were actually born under a contract. The contract is the UN Declaration of Inalienable Human Rights.
Right.
There are certain things that we are imbued with at birth. And this is something that no government has the power to either grant nor take away. Their job is to uphold that. The police force, the first thing that a police officer undertakes when they take the oath of the constabulary is to protect natural law. Above criminal law and everything else is to protect the human rights of the population. Right now, what is happening is unprecedented, where you've got police forces and governments that are overstepping their mark and literally removing things they do not have the authority or the power to do. Why is the Declaration of Human Rights so important? Because that was clearly understood is what human beings need to have access to flourish, to have optimal well-being. It's not my place to say whether it was right or wrong to take them away. In my opinion, it was completely wrong to take away people's human rights, freedoms, civil liberties. The decision was made to do that. Even if you do that for a short period of time, there will be consequences. Give or take, we've had them taken away for the last 14 months. So we've really disconnected people from their core nature and denied them their very human rights that they were born with. It's inalienable. And, a lot of people don't know what that means. It means that you cannot take them away. So that is what's happened. But obviously, there's going to be a mental and emotional impact to that. Physically, let's just kind of, because we're running out of time, and I do want to make sure we cover all the pillars. So physically, yes, we've talked about exercise and walking and eating right and hydrating and all that kind of stuff. But another fundamental right is the ability to connect with other people, other human beings. We've got governments that are telling people not to hug and kiss and literally weaponizing that, right? Virginia Satir, a family therapist in the 70s, that was, one of the people that spawned, working with people like Richard Bandler, that spawned NLP. And she said a human being needs, if I remember the figure correctly, 30 hugs a day for optimal well-being. There was science and research that went behind that. The oxytocin release, the physical connection, we've understood this. We've talked about premature babies and how that can lead to failure to thrive syndrome, which can be fatal.
Even the thalamus in the brain reacts. It's really important, yeah.
And, just the fact that we've not been able to connect with the people we love, it's not just a pink and fluffy. It's not just, we can't hug people, but it'll be okay. We require that. We require physical contact.
Do you know what, O'Neill? It's what I've found really challenging. And I think that a lot of people who are looking to experts in the press, and experts are always a loose word, isn't it? No one's an expert. Like, people know a bit about, a lot about a bit. Like, it really drives me that doctor of this, professor of that. And it's like, you studied that much of this much. It's like, why don't we say that? Like, when people introduce me as an expert, I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm clinging on by my bare hands to anything. Like, put me in a situation where I've got to fix a car and I'm just stupid. It's ridiculous. But this idea of experts, like, one of the things that I've seen is how experts who are meant to be around these kind of pillars have just absolutely denied reality to such a degree that I'm not surprised people are confused. And I was on the radio the other day with a professor who was going on about why hugging wasn't really innate. It's not really innate. And you know why it's not innate, guys? It's not innate because in Scandinavia, they don't really hug hello. Like, piss off. Like, you may not hug ideally straight away when you meet somebody in Scandinavia, I don't know, they've always seemed really friendly to me. But let me tell you this, to say it's not innate for us to have physical contact would mean a baby, when it was born, you'd just be like, yeah, I'm just going to leave it. That's what would happen. I'm just going to leave it. Because, you know, the point is a child is hardwired to follow your eyes, to connect with it so that you pick them up. They're hardwired to cry so you cuddle them. When they're dying, when they're born in premature situations, they give you skin to skin because it heals them. I mean, what's happened to the field of truth in expert dialogue? They can peddle anyone on to say anything. Yeah. And it's mind-blowing. So I actually have such empathy and sympathy with the public. Like you said, Neil, I think an emotional and mental and a physical and all those pillars comes as well from a place of we're confused at the moment. What can we control, Juliet? That's what you were saying. You know, what can we control, Michelle? You would bring that in as well. One of the things that we can control is what we choose to do at this moment in time with the resources we have. On a physical level, I'd say to everybody, please go and do something like hug as many people as possible. I think your family, if they struggle with that, just wrap your arms around them until they just accept that they're not going to die from it. Literally just expose them to it. But also, if you're one of those people who struggled, I threw myself out of a plane last weekend at 14,500 feet. And I did that because I was like, screw you, risk. Screw you, risk.
Where did you, Michelle? Emma.
I was back to a really burly guy. It was great. I had no responsibility. If I died, it was his fault. I was totally with it. But I was literally in the plane. The only place I was willing to wear a mask was in the plane because they had to do that. I'd not worn it anywhere else. And I was saying, have you sensed the irony that you're wearing a mask and we're going to throw ourselves out of a plane at 14,500 feet? And he was like, oh, it's ridiculous. But the reason I did it and the reason that people should challenge themselves to those kind of things is you are so much more than you're being told. You have so much more that you can do with your life. Do something that's really scary. And you know what? If you're scared of going to the supermarket without a mask on, just go and do it. It's going to be terrifying for you for 2 minutes. And then I'm going to guarantee somebody's going to smile at you because there's this weird allegiance with people who don't wear masks. You know, you see another person, you like give them the nod and a smile. And it's like, we belong, we belong. Now this is coming to the end. For those of you who are terrified of it, get that mask off, burn it, ideally. There'll be a lot of germs in it. It requires burning. And then go to a shop and like touch things and talk to people. It's going to be scary for you. But that physical need will soon be met by doing it. So I think, like you said, one of the things I want to make clear before I stop is I believe everybody's welcome at sessions like this. If you're a lockdown fanatic, if you're a lockdown despiser, it doesn't matter because it means that you feel things really, really painfully. And that means we're all exactly the same. The fact that we have different views is irrelevant. Our feelings come from exactly the same place. There's so much more that connects us and divides us. Stop abusing each other online. Stop abusing each other in the street. Recognize it's from the same place. And if you just acknowledge the feeling, we find a way forward.
Absolutely. So we've kind of covered social already. We've been talking about it since the beginning. The last one, I just want to get a couple of different thoughts on the spiritual, because, you know, I think for many people, not for all, but many people, established institutional religions have failed and they've lost meaning for a lot of people in modern life, particularly the younger generations. But there are many different ways to be able to ensure that you connect to something beyond yourself. So Anya, I know obviously you have a number of holistic practices. Have you got any thoughts or advice on how people can ensure their spiritual well-being and the spiritual pillar is healthy?
Well, finding your purpose, I believe, you know, living in alignment with your beliefs, and, you know, it's the key. As long as, you know, if we live in alignment with our beliefs, then we live a happy life, let's say, you know, as soon as our life and how we lead it doesn't match our beliefs, there is disconnection and unsatisfaction. And, you know, so living in coherence with our beliefs, it's living in our true purpose. And not necessarily we all know what our purpose is, but then going on to that journey to find it, I think it's really important. And, you know, we all know what we believe in and what we don't believe in a way, and what feels right or what feels wrong. You know, when it feels wrong, you have a bunch of negative emotions inside you. When it feels right, it's light and it's beautiful and you feel love, you know. And right now the nation is in fear and it feels anxious and stressed, and it's obviously not in alignment with their belief, with the core natural needs. And, you know, no one is living in their purpose at the moment if they are feeling stressed and anxious all the time. So it's really that, I think, finding that, you know, aligning yourself to your beliefs and really speaking out your truth as well, not being afraid of saying things, of saying how you feel, of not wanting to do things, of being okay, not feeling okay. You know, this is what I think, touched on, and it's really important to say that, yes, it's shitty time right now, and let's acknowledge that, and we all feel bad. And you know, it's not taboo, it's not stigma to talk about being unwell. Like, we're all unwell. It's been crazy for the past 14 months. You know, we've been deprived of so much, and it's okay to talk about it. Let's not pretend that we are okay. But then again, we don't need to focus on that, you know, because that's again focusing on the fear and focusing on the negative. What we can do in order to shift that? Yes, we acknowledge we feel like shit. Okay, that's not good. You know, what can we do in order to feel better? And that's again, I think, creating and moving from the space of love rather than fear, what you said, Neil. And I think that's really important, and getting practices into your life where you can evoke and, you know, practice love. I'm a yoga teacher, you know, for me, yoga is, you know, practice of love, because you learn about self-care and self-kindness and self-compassion. And I think when you have that towards yourself, firstly, and most importantly, then you can have it towards the others. And that's why we're talking today to concentrate on those 5 pillars, starting from yourself. Like, check in with yourself, check where you are mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. Don't worry about the others. Check on yourself, where you are on those 5 aspects. And then when you are good on those 5 aspects, you're meeting your optimal health, then you can go and help others to do the same. You can be inspiration and example, and you can live in your true purpose. And that's, for me, spiritual aspect.
I think that's so right. Don't worry about changing the world, change yourself. If we all did that, the world will change automatically. And I think that's a really, really important point. So we've overshot the time that we've got for today. Just the last couple of things that I want to raise, and then I'll come to everyone, then they can share their closing thoughts. Everyone that has participated in this, both on screen and off screen, and there's a huge army behind the scenes that have been working to put this on, have been doing this absolutely free. They're all volunteers. We totally rely on donations to make this happen. We've been doing as many as we can with no budget or little budget. Anything that you can do to help us to continue fighting for us all and for our children and society is so welcome. You can find out more about all the different work we're doing through the recovery campaign. And if you are able to support us, you can do that at timeforrecovery.org. If you want to find out more about the work we're doing specifically around mental health and the mental health clinics, you can find that at recoveryourspark.com. So that's a separate website just for the work we're doing through the clinics. You can find us on all the mainstream social media channels, so feel free to follow us. Lots of communications are going out. You can also sign up for our newsletter at timeforrecovery.org. If you've liked some of our special guests here today, like Emma, for example, please bombard her Twitter account and say we want you back, Emma, and we'll get her back in the future. So just literally spam her. It's like, Emma, come back, and we'll get her back. And also you could do the same with Michelle. Emma's very easy to find at emmakenny.tv. Michelle, what's your social media? Do you have a social media?
I've got pioneerparenting.co.uk.
Perfect. And Felix doesn't do social media unless you've joined since we last spoke. Juliet, you will have come across from from her involvement from the clinic for many weeks now. Anya, what's your social media?
It's Perfectly Imperfect Yogis.
Excellent. Fantastic. So I just want to thank everyone on screen today for all of your help and support. We're putting this very special event on for Mental Health Awareness Week. Any further questions or anything else you want, just jump over to timeforrecovery.org. You can send us your questions for next week. We will still pick up anything related to Mental Health Awareness Week. I would just like to go around with any final comments or thoughts or anything that you'd want to share. Felix.
I'm thinking how we set up this community, akin to the Bonobo community. I think that's.
Yeah, I'm there, Felix. You've got your first sign up.
I'll sign up as well.
Introduce that. Felix has been totally quiet because he's been daydreaming about the
I've just been thinking about that. No, yeah, we should be doing that. How am I going to set it up?
I'm literally ready. I'm ready for that.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Any last comments? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, a little bit. Felix said about finding like-minded people. And I think that's really relevant from what Emma said previously and what Anya said previously, because, you know, Emma's saying, rip off the mask, and Anya's saying, align with yourself. And I think there's a massive problem because there's many people who are stood there in a mask thinking, I don't want to be wearing this mask, I don't want to be wearing it, but are also feeling like I don't want to be rejected by my peers, don't want to be, and there's, whichever way you go, if you rip off the mask, you're not aligning with yourself because you don't want to be rejected by your peers. And if you keep your mask on, you're not aligning with yourself because you feel like, you know, you don't want to be wearing it. And or even maybe you don't want to be wearing it, but you feel like it's the right thing to do. But once you start surrounding yourself with like-minded people, like Felix said, then it doesn't matter which way you go. You either choose to wear the mask because that aligns with you and you follow all of the government restrictions and you do it because that aligns with you, not because you're afraid of being rejected by other people, because it aligns with you.
Perfect. Thank you, Juliet. Anya.
Well, definitely, you know, to kind of get on with what Juliet said, it's like, you know, moving from the space of love. As if you like, don't worry about what others think, don't worry about what others say. We're constantly looking for that external validation, you know, just start validating yourself for who you are. As Emma also said, you know, the power is within you, the power is within us, and, you know, just evoke that. Wake up the love for yourself, and then you won't be worrying about what others think, if it's right or wrong, because you will know your truth. You will live in your alignment.
Thank you. Michelle.
I was thinking about what Anya said earlier about looking after yourself first, and it reminded me of that when you're on an airplane, to put your mask on first before others. And I was thinking in terms of parents and children, really, and just actually, if stressed parents, you know, have stressed children, and actually if we look after ourselves, hopefully we're role modeling, we can look after our children that way as well. But I just wanted to thank you guys as well. It's my first one. I kind of froze earlier. I was zoned out and then I was like panicking. But thank you for being kind and inviting me today.
Amazing. Emma.
Yeah, just to say about the mask thing, by the way, obviously I'm talking about when they've decided that's okay, because I know a lot of people will be like freaking out that I'm suggesting go and do it at the supermarket tomorrow. But definitely the minute that you feel that that's been lifted, I don't know when, because I won't listen to the news. I'm just not going to do that. I'm not buying into that stuff. So just do it then. You've got to do it straight away, ideally, expose yourself to it. But I just would say, finally, as a human being, the only reason that I feel that I manage to be the person I am is because I have a complete faith in God. I don't mean it's a Christian or any other divinity kind of God. I mean, I believe in consciousness continuing. I believe this is an infinitely small amount of time, like a breath of consciousness, that we're all here, guys. I think we are here for a blink of an eye. And if you are not living fully, then you are not living. This existence is a gift. The idea that you are going to spend your time restricted and refusing to allow yourself to go outside and see the collateral beauty that exists in every moment, even in pain, that is something that you will never get lost. We'll never get back this last year. Have you any idea the pain, the human suffering of that knowledge when we actually contemplate that? People have died not seeing their loved ones. this is our moment where we have to start acknowledging that this breath of consciousness is a gift and it's not been given to us to waste. So personally for me, I think that the only reason I exist in this moment and I have the courage that I do is because I don't believe that the government are judging me. I don't believe the police are judging me. I believe the judgment that I will endeavour to experience and acknowledge is something that when I take my next breath and I want to go into that next upgrade journey, that I get there because I lived fully, purposefully and kindly. And that means that you have to live fully with courage. You don't get to experience a technicolor experience of this unfair, unjust, very, very diverse life. Believe me, it's not fair. I appreciate that. But you can do so much in your power to shift that fairness if you just wake up to that reality. Imagine if for a moment this isn't about what people are telling you to do. It isn't about a government that is in control of you. What if this is about something so much bigger, deeper, greater? What if this journey is about something so powerful, so magnificent? If you just wake up to that, all these things, these administrative tasks and responsibilities suddenly fall away to the purity of meaning, which is human experiences with each other and with the world around us, and being the best human within that. So that's what I want to leave you with.
I totally agree, and I think the only thing that I want to say to close is congruence. You know, for me, the most important thing is that your words and actions align. The worst thing you can do is to start to damage your relationship with the most important person in your universe, which is yourself. Because if you say something and you don't live in alignment with that, you start to damage your relationship with yourself. You stop trusting yourself. You stop believing yourself. You stop loving yourself. If you say, for example, I spent my whole, and this is just an example to give you a perspective, I spent my whole life saying I love animals, but I was causing harm and suffering to animals by eating them and causing pain and suffering to animals. When I made that point of realization, I shifted my actions to align with my words. Every day for the last 14 months, I've seen people around me that are living out of congruence with their own truth just to comply. Never override your relationship with yourself by living out of congruence. If there is something that's important to you, if there are values you hold dear, act according to that. Either change your words or change your actions, but make sure the two align. Far too many of us have compromised one or the other just to fit in or to do what we're told. It's time to stop that. This is the hour to reclaim our power. Quite literally. So I've got nothing else to say but to wish everybody so much love. Thank you again for all the wonderful team today. For those of you that celebrate Eid Mubarak, I just remembered that it's Eid today. So for all of you around the world that celebrate Eid Mubarak, enjoy the rest of your evening, and we will see you back next week. And remember, lobby Emma to come back.
Come back anytime. Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.